So last week, I made a video called Parking Tickets and the Root of All Evil. Life-changing, real, mystical advice. Wherein I described a method of protecting oneself from accidental wrongdoing, utilizing the understanding that we have a godly self and we have an animal self. Now, from the title of the video, it would seem that the implication is that the animal self is the root of all evil. And yet in the video, when I described the animal self, I said that it isn't necessarily bad. It can even be good. So to say that such a thing that can even be good is the root of all evil, this requires explanation. So what do I mean by root of all evil? In Hasidus, applied Jewish mysticism, it is described the idea that every worldly thing has a divine source. Now, of course, all things are believed to have one source. But somewhere between here and there, each individual worldly thing has an individual divine source. And what does it get from this divine source? It gets its qualities. So a worldly thing can be said to have two components. The fact that it exists at all, and the way in which it exists. Now, the fact that it exists at all is kind of indescribable. Because as soon as you start to describe it, now you're talking about the way that it exists. So I'm not going to attempt to describe the fact that anything exists at all, but rather its qualities, the way that it exists. And for the purpose of this video, the divine source of a thing, of a worldly thing, its root, so to speak, is from where it gets its qualities. So that doesn't answer the question. Actually, it makes the question more difficult. So if I'm going to say that by root, I mean a divine source from which a worldly thing gets its qualities, to say that a thing like worldly evil gets its qualities from a source that isn't necessarily bad, this is difficult. And more than that, we have another question. If I'm going to say that a worldly thing has a divine, or implicitly not worldly, source, and then I'm going to go implying that the animal self is such a divine source, and yet when I describe the animal self, I described it as being unrefined, as being the inclination to just do whatever we want. It doesn't sound very divine. It sounds rather worldly. It sounds relatable. It sounds like in our day-to-day lives in the world, we deal with this phenomenon. So this also is difficult. So in this video, I'm going to propose that the implication of the previous video was not so much that the animal self itself is the root of all evil, but that the root of the animal soul, the animal self, is the root of all evil. And when I describe this phenomenon, that is the root of the animal self. The two questions about how is this the root of evil, how does evil get its qualities from this, and also the question of how is this a divine thing, how is this something that you can call the non-worldly origin of a worldly phenomenon. These two questions should be resolved. So it is explained in Chassidus, in applied Jewish mysticism, that the root of the animal self is the world of chaos. Its name is Toihu. And it is explained that the world of Toihu, of chaos, precedes the world as we know it, which is called in the name Tikkun, the world of Tikkun, the world of order. And precedes can be thought of in the chronological sense. It can also be thought of in terms of the sequence of something coming into reality. That on the way to becoming real, while moving through various states of potential, a thing passes through this world of chaos. Into our world, the world of order. And the existence of our world is very reliant upon order. Even though sometimes things can seem chaotic. Could be because they had to pass through Toihu on the way to getting to this world of order. To pass through chaos to get to order. So, what's a good example of things in this world being reliant upon order? The highway. When you drive on the highway, everybody's driving the same direction. Everybody's driving automobiles. All the driving is being done by human beings. These are all orderly concepts. They're uniform. And so one day you're driving on the highway, and suddenly everybody slows down. You don't see a police officer. What's going on? Why is everybody slowing down? The road goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, 2 lanes. Not only is everybody slowing down, everybody's all in one lane. They're barely moving at all. This is not accomplishing the purpose of the highway. And we see lights, and we see smoke, or dust, or something. There's something thick in the air. There's somebody digging a big hole in the ground. What are they doing? They're destroying the highway. How are we supposed to drive in with a big hole in the ground? Now, you probably know what's going on intellectually, so you don't actually think that they're just purposely digging a big hole in the ground. But at the same time, you'd probably like it if the highway was functioning like a regular highway, that everybody just drives fast and gets to their destination. They're doing road construction. They're tearing up the highway in order to fix something, to make it work better, to make it more orderly. So the context is tikkun. The context is order. Order relies on things not changing, that everybody drives in the same direction. If someone on the highway should be driving the opposite direction, suddenly it's not so orderly and fair. Fortunately, that isn't something we have to deal with all too often, and the highway can be an orderly place. But in order to change something, we need an element of chaos. In order for something new to be introduced in this world of tikkun, this world of order, it first must pass through this world of chaos. So they have to dig a big hole in the highway. That's a change. And they do something underneath. They fix the electricity, and then the lights on the highway, they can install new lights, or the lights work better, or they're fixing something. I don't know what they're fixing specifically when I'm driving by them. I just know that when they're done, even though it's chaotic now, it's going to be more orderly. It's going to work better when we get to the other side. Now, it's helpful that I know what they're doing. Say the human body has a very orderly way of reproducing proteins. And suddenly some substance is introduced that changes it. Now this time, we don't know why. We don't know what's trying to be accomplished. Some virus comes in and changes the way our body reproduces the proteins. Now we have a concept of chaos being introduced. Something has changed. And unlike the highway scenario, we don't understand what's going on. We don't understand what is the benefit of this. But we do know one thing, that many, many, many times when there is chaos, the order that follows it is better than the order than was before the chaos. But in the moment, it doesn't seem right. You could even call it evil. It's doing the opposite thing in the moment than what good is supposed to be doing. And yet, all things that make their way into the world of order pass through the world of chaos. So, it should be clear at this point how what manifests as evil in our world, what seems like a change for the worse, it's a change. It disturbs the natural order of things. And this disturbance of order, this comes from Toihu, the world of chaos. And also, our world is inherently orderly. So anything that I'm going to call worldly, part of the implication of calling it worldly is that I'm calling it orderly. So a world of complete chaos, this is not so relatable, really. I have a hard time thinking in my personal life of any area that I could say is completely chaotic. Perhaps there is chaos introduced into an orderly framework, but a world completely of chaos, it's hard for me to call this worldly. And so it's much easier for me to call this divine. I don't necessarily understand it, something that's divine. I have a hard time relating to it. And yet I know that anything that comes out of it is ultimately going to turn out for the best. Like the highway construction. Another classic example. There's a person lying on a metal frame bed, and they've been given drugs so that they sleep. They can't get up. They can't even feel anything. They can't do anything. Someone in a mask comes in the room, and they start cutting them open. Zoom out, they're in a hospital. Actually, something's being fixed, something very important. But if you didn't know it was a hospital, and you looked at what was going on in the room, you would think something very out of the ordinary order of things. Something you might even think something evil is going on. So what can we do with this information? We can see that the root of evil is actually not necessarily bad and can even be good. But now it makes sense to us, at least, why it appears in our world as evil. But we know that depending on what we do with it, it could be good. And we have a direct relationship with this abstract world of chaos in our day-to-day lives, and this is our animal self. And as stated in the previous video, if by the methodology in the previous video or by another methodology we train our animal self, then we're doing our little part of the world. We're doing our little part to make the world of chaos manifest in the world of order in only a revealedly good way, in the way that not only do we have to use a stretch of the imagination or just rely on our faith, but that we can know in our heads, it can be apparent the way that things appear, that what's happening is for the best.